Welcome to The Audible, presented by Trader Joe's. I'm Ralph Russo from The Athletic, here with my colleagues Stuart Mandel and Bruce Feldman. Join us on Sunday, live on YouTube at Audible Show, 8:30 Pacific, 11:30 Eastern Time, a.m. in the morning. We will recap all of Sunday's action, and of course, you can watch every episode of The Audible on YouTube. This week, today, we'll answer your mailbag questions and we'll talk about some breakout players to watch for this weekend's games. But first, inspired by my colleague's conversation a couple days ago when I was not on the show, I was motivated to kind of bring back some coaching carousel stuff. I know we feel like we talk about the coaching carousel all the time, guys, but there's a lot of coaches being hired or being fired and who will be hired. So it's understandable that we keep coming back to this subject. And I want to take you guys to task a little bit because I feel like the way we talk about who's a good hire, who's a bad hire, who should be hired, why schools should go after certain guys, is kind of crazy. Like, let's talk about Jeff Brohm for a second. Louisville beats Miami on Friday because Carson Beck throws 4 interceptions. And during that game, I have my pal Stu texting us, Penn State should hire Jeff Brohm. Like, I think
and
Jeff
absolutely
Brohm,
nobody was mentioning him before that game. Is that your point?
And nobody was mentioning before that game. Jeff Brohm beats top 5 teams. Okay, 2 of the top 5 teams he beat were Iowa and Michigan State a few years ago. That was Mel Tucker's Michigan State. It was still top 5 teams, but I'm just saying, like, I just feel like we go from 0 to 60 on these coaches. Like, you guys were making like really passionate
Ralph,
arguments.
I'm starting to think you might be new to college football. I know you've been covering it forever. But like last week, you said everybody should just be calm and rational and reset their expectations, which is never going to happen. And now you want us to stop knee-jerk reacting to results of games? What sport is this?
But like you guys were making these like passionate defenses or passionate pleas for like, hey, like if they can't get Lane Kiffin, Florida should hire Jedd Fisch. And I want to be clear here. Jeff Brohm's a good coach. Jedd Fisch is a good coach. Pretty good guy, too. I know Fisch a little bit. I'm not trying to disparage any of these coaches, but it just seems like it's all just chasing the shiny object. And partly because we do that, it leads to these crazy expectations, unreasonable expectations that fans get so that nobody's good enough. Like no matter who we hire, like Matt Rule, that guy's trash. We got to go hire Jeff Brohm and pay him $12 million because Carson Beck threw 4 interceptions. So Jeff Brohm is today's genius. It just seems like we twist in the wind here, Bruce, from like who the hot guy is without really like making substantive arguments. We just sort of are, instead of hiring coaches, it seems like schools are hiring narratives.
Okay, Ralph, if you're going to go play the voice of reason in this sport, as it's so counter to what everything here operates, from the media to every other thing, and all these groups that pop up around it, to the ADs who can't control themselves, all these things, I will ask you this, and not to defend Stu's honor too much here, but I'm going to agree. Jeff Brohm is a terrific coach because he's not at blue blood programs. I know you're not dumping on him, but if you can't get Lane Kiffin, who else, if you're Florida, are you going to get that would make some sense there? Because the reality on this to me is you're Florida, whether you're Jeremy Foley, the old AD, or Scott Strickland, the current AD, they have tried almost everything imaginable. They went from after Urban left, and even before Urban was there, they hired Ron Zook, who hadn't been a head coach, could really recruit, but wasn't ready for that job. Then obviously Urban left, and then it became like the hot assistant coach who everybody liked inside the sport, and Will Muschamp. to Jim McElwain, who'd been the Saban guy, who had done well at a group of, a little bit. Jim McElwain, not very similar personality wise to Billy Napier, but also very much like, Saban guy who had success at a smaller level program. And at one point they went to Dan Mullen, who knew the SEC and was an urban guy and worked there. And that worked until it didn't, because he wasn't recruiting well enough. So before we get too far down the road, who would you think that they should be targeting if you're going to ding Fisch and especially Jeff Brohm?
I'm not going to answer that. I refuse to answer that, because that's not the point. My point is not to get into the weeds of.
It's a podcast. That's where we all live. We're in the weeds.
No. But here's my point. I don't know if it's necessarily like you are sort of dicing, like getting into like, oh, well, this guy, that. And my point is like, I think that the way we talk about these coaches is broken in general. The way we judge and try to evaluate coaches. And frankly, I think it's the same way for the people who are hiring them, because it's just, there's so much volatility here. It's all about sort of guessing who might be great, which is exactly the way Scott Strickland talked about it earlier in the week when he was having his press conference, his post-Billy Napier firing press conference.
It is tricky. There are 3 current coaches in college football who have won national championships. So unless one of those 3 decide that they want to come and we think they're the right fit, we're going to have to be making a projection somewhere along the line.
The interesting thing when you hear him say that, Scott Strickland of all people, is that that's exactly what he did with Todd Golden, the basketball coach. Like, he was the coach at USF, San Francisco. How do you know that guy's going to win a national championship in basketball? You don't. He whatever criteria Scott Strickland used to decide he was the guy, like on that one, he won. It's like he hit big on a less known stock, right? But he probably used mostly the same process on Billy Napier, another guy who was coming from a lower tier job, if you will, and that did not go well. So he's right. Like, at the end of the day, and I think this is what you're saying to some extent, Ralph, is like 10, 11, $12 million jobs, millions of people's moods and livelihoods swing on this. And at the end of the day, you're just guessing. You're just making, once in a while you get like when Jim Harbaugh came back to Michigan, there was no question, like that was the guy who was the right guy at that time for that job. I'd say the same thing, Urban Meyer at Ohio State. But most of the time, you're guessing.
That's why I refuse to sort of pick a guy, because my point is I don't want to pick a guy. My point is like Scott Strickland will pick a guy and we'll figure it out from there. But like me picking a guy, like I'm fine with Jedd Fisch. I'm fine with Eli Drinkwitz. I'm fine with Lane Kiffin. None of these is better than the other. They all have interesting resumes. And the other part of it is, which you guys talked about the other day, it's really more about who you can get as opposed to who you want. And that's another way we set these very unrealistic expectations for our readers and fans who are like, why can't we get Lane Kiffin? Because Lane Kiffin has a good job, and a lot of places have good jobs that pay well now.
You know who you are, Ralph? You're the anti-Ari Wasserman. And this is a podcast, and we expect some takes. We expect you to go out on a limb.
But this is my take. My take is you guys are crazy. That's my take. My take is
we cover college football.
My take is the way you guys talk about coaches is broken. You just chase around like the guy who wins the big game every week.
Look, I don't think any of us consider ourselves to be hot take artists by any means, right? But
unless you do, Ralph, unless you consider us that.
Well, we do a podcast where people tune in, they want to hear our opinions. So if let's just say, okay, we broker a truce here, and for the next 6-7 weeks, whatever's left, we will not speculate on any school's next coach. who's going to still listen to that podcast?
No, I
boring.
I do get that. So, okay, that's you guys are taking a little bit too extreme. I understand the idea of laying out the candidates, but I do think, again, like you do acknowledge that it's weird the way we place certain guys in pecking orders. Like I'm going to hit another guy who I don't have much of a relationship with, but I also want to make people understand, like, John Summerall has a good record and is a good coach. Like by all accounts, he has done a good job at 2 spots. But he has now been sort of just anointed as the next SEC coach, right? He's going to get an SEC job. John Summerall, that guy's a great coach. He's going to get an SEC job. Okay, I guess that makes sense. But, you know, we anointed Tom Herman and that didn't work out very well. And we anointed Scott Frost, though I did not anoint Scott Frost, but we anointed Scott Frost and that didn't work out pretty well. I think that what you end up needing to do is to sort of understand the volatility of this all. And again, like what ends up happening is the ADs end up hiring the narrative, right? Because John Summerall, the narrative around John Summerall right now is so good. That guy, he's definitely the next SEC coach. That guy's going to be a really good SEC coach. It's easier for the AD to hire John Summerall, right?
Can I just interrupt this podcast to read a text message I just got?
Fire away.
Are you really sure about this guy as the third wheel?
What?
Stu, I don't want to put you out there, but I don't know. I'm having my doubts.
I was like, as you were saying that, I was thinking like, is it from Matt? There's nobody else here.
Okay. Ralph, we have taken your point. Neither one of us like it. Hopefully the viewers aren't disgusted by you. But
can I just
Yes.
say real quick, Ralph,
Yeah, please.
to your point?
Yeah.
What you just said about the ADs hiring narratives, if that's the case, that's on them. I mean, it's like
Sure.
The Indianapolis Colts don't look at, Mel Kiper's lists or turn on NFL Network and then say, that's who we should draft. So Bruce can put out and Chris Vanini put out their candidates and whatnot. Scott Strickland should not listen to us. He should do his own research. I know he'll talk to a search firm probably and hire the person that he thinks is the best for the job, not the person that the fans will love. Because by the way, if the guy wins, the fans will love him. Not the guy he thinks will win the press conference, as we always say. Who do you think is the best guy for the job?
Yeah, and we'll move on. In fact, we're going to probably take a break here. And honestly, like I'm getting on you guys just to make the point and to just emphasize the point, right? Like the idea that, again, like I think we are heading for a massive coaching cycle where a lot of fans are going to be disappointed. And I don't think it necessarily has to be that way, but I think the way we talk about these hirings and firings, and again, the way we evaluate, and everybody, not just us, but like the way the industry evaluates these coaches is the reason why I expect a lot of fans to be grumbling when their favorite team hires Coach A or Coach B. Let's take a quick
before we go on. I do.
Of course. Yes. Yep.
I do want to add one thing to what you're saying.
Okay.
I don't know whether it makes your point or what it does for it. But 4 or 5 years ago, there were, I think, 3 hires made in the span of like 48 hours. Also, by the way, all had the same agent at the time, Trace Armstrong. In some sequence, it was USC hiring Lincoln Riley. It was obviously a splash hire. Sonny Dykes got hired by TCU. Not as big of a hire, but obviously one that he was the first one to have success of these 3. And then Brian Kelly got hired by LSU. I think on some point you would say USC hit the grand slam because they got Lincoln Riley when nobody was like, oh, what are they going to do there? Brian Kelly was an established, proven winner at multiple places. Sonny Dykes had an up and down, kind of run at different places. But I think it just shows you how we're all, to some degree, guessing on the fits, on the narrative. I mean, USC absolutely wanted the splashiest hire imaginable. And now, quite honestly, most of the USC people I know are kind of not happy with the hire. It doesn't seem like a lot of people in LSU, I mean, it could change in 3 days, but are not that happy with that hire. I don't know about Sonny, but I mean, and again, maybe that makes your point, Ralph. I don't know. I don't think it's on us as much as it is on the industry.
It does. And now I'm happy now that you've essentially agreed with me and helped make my point. We're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to come back and talk about some breakout players to watch this weekend. And down the road, we're going to do some mailbag questions. So we'll be right back. All right. Everybody's favorite segment, breakout players for the weekend, where we try to go a little deeper than surface level and highlight some players in games that you should be keeping an eye on this weekend. And first, we will go to Stu.
All right, you guys watched the Arizona State Texas Tech game, which was absolutely frantic down the wire. And Jaron Hamilton makes a 49-year-old.
I know where that came from.
I'm 49 years old. That was amazing. Jaron Hamilton makes a
just take a breath.
49-yard catch. I'm trying to say 49-yard catch. And I'm like, who is that guy? Well, he's a freshman who prior to that game had only one catch, but that one catch was for 44 yards. Now Arizona State has to turn around and play Houston this week. And their, favorite receiver, Jordan, don't call me Hudson, Jordan Tyson, is going to be out for this game. So this guy who just last week emerged on the scene is now probably going to be there, have a big expanded role in this game. Keep an eye out for him.
Okay, what you got, Bruce?
I'm going to go to the Minnesota-Iowa game. Minnesota coming off a big win where they whipped Nebraska. Their passing game has started to emerge more. Drake Lindsey, one of the better young quarterbacks in college football, and a potential go-to guy is Lemeke Brockington, who I first kind of found out who he was because he was a big Freaks List guy, and he was on there. He's had back-to-back weeks with touchdowns. Obviously, Iowa's always been known for Phil Parker's defense and how good they are in pass defense. Lemeke Brockington, the only guy, I think, in 20 years who actually sent me a thank you note after making the Freaks List. So a very thoughtful young man in addition to a freak athlete. And I think he's going to have another big game this weekend as PJ Fleck tries to build off last week's game. What do you got, Ralph?
Okay, so I'm going back to the game I'm going to be at, which, sometimes we like to go a little more off the radar, but I will be at Missouri Vanderbilt this weekend, a massive SEC game. Still takes a little adjusting to say that, a massive SEC game between Missouri and Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt has a terrific tight end in Eli Stowers, who is, going to be a high draft pick, maybe an All-American. They got another tight end who kind of had a bit of a breakout last week named Cole Spence, 6'7", third year from Georgia, not a transfer from Georgia, but out of the high school from Georgia. But frankly, looks like a Georgia tight end. Looks like a university. The University of Georgia has been pumping out these massive athletic looking tight ends. And Cole Spence kind of looks that way. He had 5 catches last week and a touchdown in the win against LSU. And I do think he's a good example, Bruce, of how the development system there at Vanderbilt is really clicking, and that this isn't just this isn't your old Vanderbilt, right? This is not just a portal all-star team either. They've been doing a really good job at farming around for some off-the-radar high school recruits and then developing them into players who, like I said, this guy looks like a possible NFL tight end.
Yeah, I was kind of pumped when I saw that you were going to include Spence. The reason why is because I'm there. By the time this goes up, hopefully there will be a story I've done on Vanderbilt and talking to Barton Simmons, who a lot of our audience may know as a guy who spent 15 years working for both 24/7 Sports as well as Rivals in the recruiting space, and then he went to work inside a program as the GM at Vandy with his childhood buddy, Clark Lee. And so Spence is one of the guys we talked about. We also talked about a handful of guys, in addition, Diego Pavia, who are portal additions that they found and why they have turned that program around. And it's been pretty remarkable.
I think people have this Vandy story, right, has been so phenomenal. And you forget that actually the first 3 years, right, Clark Lea went 2-10, 5-7, and 2-10. And at that point, like the Barton Simmons move was so unusual, right? It was a big deal at the time. And I remember by the time they got 2-10 in the third season, like, oh, I guess that didn't work out. You know, to look at this, they haven't built a roster at all. And well, I guess, again, patience, stick with it. Their vision has come to life. Ralph, if they win the game, I assume if Vandy wins the game, your column will not be, this is why Florida should hire Clark Lea.
Or Penn State, right?
Or Penn State
should hire Clark Lea. No, I'll probably, I don't know, maybe I will. Maybe I'll lean into it and make Clark Lea the best candidate and the new rising star in coaching. The last thing I'll say about the Vanderbilt situation and what Bruce wrote about is I think when the portal became a thing and transfers went wild, Vanderbilt, I think Lee's build took a step back because of that, because suddenly now they were losing guys who they developed.
London Humphreys, you're talking about Georgia. I mean, he was a big athletic young receiver that Vandy signed, and they quickly lost to Georgia.
Yeah. So now they're able to retain them a little more because, you know, the way they're situated with NIL, and they're doing a better job of keeping the guys in-house. So it has to be both, right? You have to be able to identify, develop, and then now the key today is retain. We are going to take one last break, and then we're going to come back and hit your mailbag questions and give somebody a $12 Trader Joe's gift card.
All right, it's time to get to the mailbag. As always, you can send your questions to theaudiblepod@gmail.com. And if yours not only gets on the air, but we think it's the most interesting one, you can win a $12 Trader Joe's gift card. All right, guys, for this first one, familiar name in our mailbag, actually, Gordon Cameron from Burlington, Ontario. And he picks up where we left off about the coaching carousel. Which sought-after head coaches should absolutely stick with the jobs they have rather than going off to chase that shiny brass ring at some other school? Who comes to mind for you, Ralph?
Well, to keep with a theme of the show, I might not answer this question directly. No, I will. I will give an answer. And I think it might be Clark Lea because he's such a perfect fit at Vanderbilt. And I think sometimes you have to watch when you chase happy. Is it fair to say Marcus Freeman? Like, I don't even think Marcus Freeman's truly available. Like, there's really no reason for Marcus Freeman to leave for what would be lateral moves, right? In no way is like Notre Dame to Penn State or Notre Dame to Florida not a lateral move. But the reason why this becomes so hard for coaches, and this is how I'll finish answering it, there's no loyalty on the other end. You don't get a lot of credibility capital. You don't build up a lot of capital by staying. Your fans aren't like, gosh, we're so happy you stayed. And then when you have a 5-7 year, they're like, oh, that's okay, because you stayed and we love you for staying.
You're describing Mark Stoops to a T right now.
Yeah, there's nothing, you don't really get much for staying. And in fact, you're rewarded for resetting your clock and going to the next place where they adore you for where you get the honeymoon, you buy the honeymoon. Think of Shane Beamer, who's been like pinballing around. Like, he came in and he was better than expected. And everybody was like, people in South, oh, this guy's great. Like we went 6-6 and we thought we were going to win 2 games this year. And then it wasn't as good the next year. And then he pinballs back up and it's like a 9-win season. And everybody's like, man, Shane's great. We got to give him a contract extension. And now they kind of stink again this year. And people in South Carolina are like, I can't believe we gave this guy a contract extension. So I give you, I think Lane should consider staying. I think Marcus Freeman definitely should stay unless he can get an NFL job. I think Clark Lea's a good example of stay because you fit where you are. And frankly, that's a place that maybe belies what I just said and really would appreciate him staying because they've been so bad for such a long time. But it ends up being really hard to stay because you don't really gain anything by doing so.
I think what makes this coaching carousel a little bit unique, if the guys we think will be mentioned, is you have Lee, you have Brent Key, and you have Brohm, obviously, who are at their alma maters. And it gets really sticky when it comes to that because the fans and the alumni assume that the coach will be every bit as loyal and rah-rah and diehard as they are. But as you said, Ralph, like, these are guys, this is their careers, this is their professions. They're going to do what they think is the best.
Can I bring up one example of this as you were saying it? And I was thinking about it. Now, look, this is different circumstance because this is a guy who was at his alma mater, did very well, respected, but the program was kind of left behind by its conference. And that's Jonathan Smith, leaves Corvallis to go to Michigan State. He's not even been there 2 years. And there's a lot of people there who want to get rid of him, right? So it fits kind of what Ralph was saying, again, but it's a little different in Jonathan Smith's case because the Oregon State he coached, the first couple of years, it's gone. The conference is way different now. So it's just, I think that's a unique circumstance.
And they still got ticked at him for leaving. Like, what seems to the coaching profession an obvious move isn't so obvious when you're this fan base that's affected. So when you look at Jeff Brohm, who is going to be who I think is my answer to they should stay where they are. That's easy for me to say. You coach. First of all, you're in the ACC, right? You're not in the SEC or the Big Ten. Everybody considers those to be the two power conferences. It's hard to turn that down. And also, I mean, let's say he says, I'm going to stay at Louisville for the rest of my life, for the rest of my career. I'm going to retire here. And then in 3 years, all hell breaks loose and the ACC doesn't exist anymore, right? The Super League forms, Louisville gets left behind. So there are other factors to consider for these guys beyond this is my home, this is my school that I grew up rooting for.
Yeah. Before I give Bruce the next question, these coaches, like, you can say, well, it didn't work out for Jonathan Smith. How much is that contract? I think it worked out just fine for Jonathan Smith. You gotta strike while the iron's hot. Like, you don't have a window of opportunity here to be the hot coach for very long because of our initial conversation of how the winds blow and change the temperature on these coaches, not just from year to year, but from game to game. All right, next one up. Florida Big Three breakdown. Hey guys, love the pod and the addition of Ralph moving to 3 times a week.
That wasn't in there. It just said love the pod. He didn't say anything about you.
No, it literally says that. It literally says that.
Now we know who Ralph's picking for the gift card.
It says that, and there was no way I was not reading that. Again, the show was great the other day. It just wasn't as good as when I'm here. As a Florida fan, I want to take on this topic in the Sunshine State. Can Florida State, and Miami all be successful programs at the same time? As beginning of the coaching search, FSU seems destined to same result. Mario has Miami rolling, but history suggests it may be rough. What do you think, Bruce? Because this is a topic that comes up a lot, and I think it's an interesting question that maybe has changed now that the landscape of college football has changed.
Yeah, it's a harder needle to thread. Like, you remember in the 90s, they all won national titles when Spurrier, Bowden, and at that point, Dennis Erickson, and then later, Butch Davis took over Miami. I think that it's a harder needle to thread because more schools have set up shop in poaching talent out of there. It doesn't mean you can't live off of what's in state, but I just think that you look around. I mean, one of the biggest things that changed Alabama's offense was Miami wasn't keeping the best receivers in South Florida. They were going to Tuscaloosa, right? And so I think you see examples of that. And it just comes down to if they have the right coaches, right? We'll see if Mike Norvell can get it back going. I mean, we talked the other day about what that's like. I do know this, Mario Cristobal is going to be tough to beat for recruits when he has resources. And, 4 picks or not the other day from Carson Beck, I don't think they're going anyway. They're going away. So now the question is, how does Florida match up with that? with whoever takes over. Can FSU rebound? But there's a couple other little pieces of this too. I don't think USF and UCF weren't a thing in the 90s. I don't know if that aspect of it, like Jim Levitt did a really good job taking some players. I don't know what those, some of those guys certainly became NFL players, but I don't know how many of those guys would have been starters, when Miami was rolling or Florida State or Florida were rolling. But I just think it's another piece of it. Now you've diluted the pool a little bit more where, that's another option of places to go get playing time and go play.
I think all of those, everything you guys just said is it all contributes to it. But I also wonder if you look back at that period in the 80s and 90s when they were all rolling at the same time, Florida State with Bobby Bowden and Florida with Steve Spurrier had two of the greatest coaches in the history of the sport. At coaching in the same state at the same time. Miami was a little different because they kept it going across several coaches. So I guess what I'm saying is now you look at those three schools over the last 10 to 15 years, the only one that had some sustained success with somebody was Florida State with Jimbo. Won them a national championship. They continued to win at a pretty high level there for about 5 years after that. Florida and Florida post Urban Meyer and Miami, frankly, for the last 20 years, just keeps swinging and missing and swinging and missing. So we don't know what it looks like when those three schools all hit the jackpot at the same time with their coaching hires.
Guys, this question's from Mike in Winston-Salem. I'm going to direct it to you, Stu. As has been discussed, a lot of the top-tier quarterbacks coming into this season have struggled. Nussmeier, Klubnik, Sellers, Arch, Drew Aller, no doubt. While that's probably due to a variety of reasons, is it possible that schools are simply committing too much money to future NFL prospects, which is creating deficiencies at other positions on the team, such as the O-line? Would it be better to pay a more modest amount of money for a good college-level quarterback, i.e. Diego Pavia, so that money can be spent on other areas of the team rather than splurge on a future top NFL draft pick who is forced to run for their life due to poor O-line play? Vandy's offense with Pavia is much better than LSU's with Nussmeier and my Gamecocks with Sellers. Stu, what do you think?
First of all, when I saw Drew Aller's name, did you guys notice last week while watching football that they were still running, I think it's Dodge was still running an ad with Drew Aller in it, where they're like, Drew Aller, here's a big NIL deal. I was like, did nobody think to pull that after the Penn State Northwestern game? It makes total sense what he's saying. I think the complicating thing is, first of all, every guy that he listed there, I would not say was a sure thing home run guy coming into the season. Maybe Klubnik had proven more than the others, but certainly Drew Aller hadn't. Sellers had 1 year, etc. So it's not like you'll hear it with the rev share, right? We've heard a lot of coaches, programs say like, we're basically following the NFL formula. This is what percentage they allocate to the quarterback. So that's what we're doing. Okay, yeah, but the NFL, for the most part, is allocating that money to Josh Allen, Pat Mahomes, right on down the line, like guys who have been doing it at a high level for many, many years. Other than a couple very, very high-end college quarterbacks in a given year, you're basically gambling on whoever. So then does that mean, okay, maybe we should scale back on the QBs, maybe like he said, not that Diego Pavia was a sure thing either when Vanderbilt got him. The problem there is if you don't spend the money on the quarterback and the quarterback stinks, you're not going to win anything. It's just so important to have that guy. So even if you can't be 100% certain that if we give Drew Aller a big contract for his senior year, he'll come back and lead us to glory. What do you do if you don't do that and he turns pro and the next guy up stinks? I don't know that you can justify that. I think I'd be curious on your thoughts on this, Ralph, but I would probably do what they're doing and invest heavily in the quarterback and a couple other positions. If I'm going to spend less money, maybe it's on running back, something like that. But I wouldn't want to mess around with QB.
Well, and we're not sure. We don't think Vanderbilt's getting a bargain with Pavia, right? I mean, we don't exactly know the numbers from each school and what guys are getting, right? You wrote about that when we wrote about Darian Mensah.
They probably got a bargain on him his first season, but there's no way they're getting a bargain.
Yeah,
also some of these examples, like LSU, Brian Kelly said they tripled their NIL payroll this year from last year. They're not skimping. It's just not worked out so far with the O-line they have. And by the way, they had to replace 4 offensive linemen who went to the Senior Bowl last year, including a top 5 pick in Will Campbell. I think a lot of this is it's really hard to, that's the position more than any other, the O-line, to develop continuity and to have it. It's hard to just like microwave it and have it work out really good.
Yeah, it's just an oversimple. I don't mind the question. It's a good question because it is a good question. It is literally what colleges, programs, college football programs are grappling with right now. How to allocate these resources. You're right. It's a little bit of an NFL model, Stu, but not precisely, right? You'll hear when you talk to some GMs at the college level that, well, we actually do value running backs a little more here because we value playmakers. Like in college football, like anybody who makes a difference, who's a next level athlete is maybe a little more valuable. So it's not a one-to-one. It's a NFL framework, but it's not a one-to-one. There are adjustments being made there. But as you said, you can't really do much of anything without a quarterback. And I do think Bruce is right there. Like it might not have been a matter of like, hey, we didn't spend enough in this area as much as it's just hard to fill all of our needs. And we had a couple of places where, things went wrong.
Yeah, and keep in mind in the NIL model that we've had up to this point with collectives, technically, if you have enough money, you don't have to skimp on anyone. Cody Campbell is going to go get the quarterback and the offensive lineman and the defensive lineman. Not everybody's in that position, obviously. What's changing things a little bit is, at least as of this recording, rev share is the predominant rev share is the predominant way you pay guys now, and NIL Go, as of this recording, still exists. You still don't know for sure how much you're going to be able to give them on top of the rev share. So yeah, now these schools are having to run the analytics and run the numbers and the data and say, what is the proper way to allocate the money? So far from the ones I'm familiar with, they are all of, we got to give a lot of it to the quarterback.
I think one other point that's kind of lost in this, and just with the examples of, you mentioned Lenora Sellers, talked to LSU, certainly with Sellers. I mean, the offensive coordinator who was there last year, Dow Loggins, is now a head coach at App State. There's a lot of South Carolina fans who are not happy with Mike Shula as the OC. I mean, I think there's a lot of folks who are very frustrated in Baton Rouge with Joe Sloan as the OC. We saw Brian Kelly react to, questions about his offense, I want to say like a month ago at a post-game press conference. But I think it's a lot of times people will point it as, it is always the players. And so, I think it's such a puzzle where it can be how the fit is, what the scheme is, how they're being coached, all those things. It's just, I think as Ralph might have said, it's like hard to oversimplify. It's a hard thing to oversimplify. And I think that's sometimes ends up happening.
I think there's also a possibility we may be having a conversation about whether Texas Tech spent enough on quarterback, right? Baron Mortons is like a good player. He's been hurt. They got a pretty good backup, but I really think Texas Tech looked at quarterback, thought, we're okay here. We might not be awesome, but we're okay here. But we were all talking coming into this season about like, well, why didn't you upgrade there? Like, have all that money. Why don't you go try to upgrade there? So that's the other side of the coin here. Not to bang on the kid who's been hurt, but I do wonder if at some point maybe Texas Tech will go, maybe we could have done a little better there.
I actually think Baron Morton's been really good this year when he's been healthy. His problem is, and it didn't start this year, he always gets injured.
Yeah,
so whatever they paid for him or didn't pay for him, there was the risk of this guy gets hurt a lot. So, but prior to last week's game, the backup had played pretty well too. they just had a rough game that week. I thought you were going to say people might be questioning the entire Cody Campbell Texas Tech strategy if they follow up that one last week with a couple more L's.
Okay, guys, I think I know which way Ralph's going to vote, but who gets the $12 Trader Joe's card this week?
We'll
I
let
mean,
Ralph go first.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely going to go with our second emailer who gave me a big old compliment. I'm sorry, I always forget the emailer's names, but that came from Ryan in San Francisco.
Are you sure you want to set the precedent that if you just butter up the host, you'll win the gift card?
Yeah, I'm actually fine with that. I'm really
Okay.
like I'm really.
We'll see who gets that nod next week.
I'm a
Bruce,
cheap
what do you
date,
got?
really.
I'm going to take our friend Gordon Cameron, who, by the way, sounds like he should be like his name should be on a bottle that Scott Docterman is drinking. Like I feel like on a Friday, because it's just a perfect beer name. But I like the question. I think it's a smart question, especially in this time. It kind of Ralph leaned into it as much as he probably would have liked. I think that was a good question. I'm voting for him.
I actually, when you said that, I looked at when I saw his name and then Ontario below it, Canada. I thought you were going to say Gordon Cameron sounds like he could be in Rush. That is for whatever reason, that's what struck me. He could be in the band Rush. Have we ever had a situation where each of us voted for somebody different?
Well, that's not the way it's supposed to work now. The
Yeah.
first two people are supposed to vote, and then the third person is
breaks the tie.
required to break
Breaks
the
the
tie.
tie.
Yeah.
Because I just want to apologize to Mike from Winston-Salem because I was going to give him, I would have voted for him. Now I got to take one of the other ones. And I'm actually going to, as much as I gave you some grief there, Ralph, I am going to side with you on Ryan from San Francisco. Can the Florida schools be good at the same time? Was a nice thought exercise. And I think we covered a lot of ground there. So Ryan, I think I know what city will be in your mailing address, but send us the full mailing address to theaudiblepod@gmail.com. We will be back, as Ralph said at the top of the show, we'll be back on Sunday morning for our weekly recap show. That airs live on YouTube at 11:30 a.m. Eastern, 8:30 a.m. Pacific. The YouTube channel is @Audible Show, and you can find all our episodes on there as well. We'll see you next time.